Yeah, it's been a year. I've gone into my presenter mode. Yeah. How's your year been? Epic.
It's been good. I remember when you said it to me, it didn't. I couldn't figure out if a year had felt long or short.
I remember that the last time we spoke a year ago, you were saying you were going off to do a retreat. Was that the one in Spain?
No, so that one didn't happen.
Okay.
I can't remember now why. Well, just nobody wanted to come, basically. So it didn't happen. But then I did one just a few weeks ago in Spain. Yeah, kind of same company, same. I think the one the year before was in a different place, but this one was in just outside of Malaga, like kind of in the countryside up the mountains. It was beautiful. Really, really enjoyed it. The whole actually experience of teaching on a retreat was obviously the first one that I'd done, and it was lovely. It was a really, really, really enjoyable week. Yeah.
But so because it's a company, you don't have to organise anything. It's just a case of show up and teach.
It's great.
Yeah, man, I think that is the way. Well, it depends what your priorities are, but you're so busy at the moment with teaching and training that a retreat, man, it takes so much organisation. And what I've realised as well, this is a big one. If you decide to co-host with someone, you're better off one person organising it. So one person organises it all, and then that person pays the other co-host a salary. Yeah, that's better than two people trying to organise it. Because in my opinion, this is what, and from the research I've done, is that it gets to, unless you live together, you see each other a lot, and you can talk about things, trying to communicate over email and stuff, it can get a bit complicated.
Yeah, I think if it was to happen sort of quite organically, it's kind of like it would kind of work quite well, you know, if just through conversations, whatever the idea for a retreat kind of comes up and you kind of go for it. But if it was, I think almost not forced upon you is not the right way to put it, but if it didn't kind of have that organic beginning, to try and co-teach something with somebody would be relatively challenging, or co-organize or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think co-teaching it is all right because but it's just the organisation, and also as well how people sign up. Like, what system do you have in place? I try to be all flash and use Revolut, not knowing that most people don't use Revolut.
I think my friends in London use that.
Revolut.
Yeah, so like for paying people money that you owe them and stuff.
Paying people money, it's handy, but then maybe it's not as big in Ireland.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I don't use it anyways.
You don't use it, yeah. So, but it's really handy, and I think, I suppose whenever you do something for the first time, you learn, don't you? Like, you learn from how you could have done things better. But with the retreat, when you went there, were you the sole yoga teacher?
Pretty much. There was another one of the ladies who organised the retreat as well. It's a company called Retiros del Almas, and so one of the ladies is part of that. She is Spanish. She's based in Spain, and she's a yin teacher. So
nice.
She taught a couple of yin workshops while we were there, which was good. But I was kind of doing more of the teaching, which was nice. Yeah, it was good. It was a little bit more tiring than I kind of expected it to be, from like a teaching point of view, but in a nice way. You know what I mean? It was
tiring physically or emotionally?
Energetically, I'd say, more than anything. I sort of felt very much, for the first few days at least, it was I found it a really strange experience at times, because I think when a company brings you somewhere to do a retreat, there becomes this sort of level of respect that people kind of treat you with. It was very much like, oh, this is Brian, he's the teacher. And, being introduced to people, and I was like, all right. And so I think for a few days I kind of acted a bit like that. I was very much, I am the teacher here. I'm, I have to be,
wise.
Coming down for breakfast, very much like, But so I think for the first few days I was kind of playing up to that a little bit. But then obviously you get to know like people on the retreat better, and it was a smallish group, which was amazing. So that was nice. But it was just kind of I think maybe I felt that I had to be kind of on the ball, maybe quite a lot. Because one of the things I realized going over there was there's actually quite a big like responsibility, without, I'm sure, the fact that, you know, going to Spain, the food was amazing, the place was amazing, it was definitely a big pull, but people are kind of paying money to go with you on holidays, kind of. Yeah. And so I felt quite a lot of responsibility to make it like a nice holiday, and I think that got a little bit tiring. But it's in a very, very nice way, you know what I mean, like a good kind of tired.
I suppose maybe it's a bit like, I know I'm not a father, but like when you have a kid, you're like, right, now I have to kind of look after people, and it's not just for an hour. It's like, you know, go to the shop, get everyone ice lollies, or I don't know, whatever you do on a retreat.
But it was a really, really nice group of people, and a really interesting group of people. Like there was one of the girls works in psychology, one of the girls works in kind of like speech therapy.
Oh wow!
So people who kind of like, you know, I learned a lot just from like my conversations with them and stuff like that. I sometimes get that as a teacher, that like, you know, when there's someone there who's like massively more qualified than you in certain things, like, I don't really have that much to offer you. Like, you know, but so it was just a really nice experience. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. Yeah.
You knew a couple of people there already from YogaHub, didn't you? A couple of students.
Yeah. So there was a lot of people from Dublin that came.
Did that make it a bit easier in terms of the familiarity to?
In a way, yeah. In a way, I think Irish people in general have quite like an easygoing way to them, which is always sort of like, I think always kind of puts me at ease a little bit as well.
Yeah.
But it was the thing that I actually enjoyed about it most, and it's something I actually kind of see myself moving towards a bit more, was just being able to work with people more individually. You know, kind of at the start of the retreat, I gave everyone a piece of paper and was just like, write down what you want from this retreat, you know, whether that's a physical thing, a not physical thing, and I will tailor what we're doing towards what you want to work on, which I think is really important. Like, you know, obviously traditionally yoga wasn't taught to groups of 40 strangers in a room. It was taught on an individual basis, which I think is, obviously depending on what exactly you're looking to get from it, but I think it is the best way to learn under specific tutelage. So that was an aspect of it that I really, really enjoyed. That was good.
That's funny you say that, man, because I don't, at the moment I'm doing no privates at all. But yesterday my sister asked me if I'd teach her chaturanga. I went down to her house, and I ended up, I was there for hour and a half and went through loads of fundamental stuff, and it was really rewarding to teach someone the basics without having to feel like you need to entertain a room of 40 people, even though I love the from almost a selfish point of view, I love being in a room of 40 people and it's a good buzz, and I love the atmosphere, and I love being the student in a room of 40 people, but definitely there is something about the one-to-one where it's instant feedback.
Yes.
And then you can actually also as well, I think, or I found I was more conscious of how I was communicating things, because I was looking right at her and I'd explain something, I'd look at her facial expression, see if she got it or not. If she didn't, I'd try and rephrase it, or a different way of maybe demonstrating something. Whereas when you're, as you said, in a class with loads of people, you're more thinking about voice projection. Where are you standing in the room? How you have to teach more broadly, I suppose. Yeah. So it's a different skill, but that is interesting. Yeah.
And I find when people want to work on specific things, it's something which I kind of, on some of the teacher training courses, when we talk about like sequencing and stuff like this, and that, you know, if you're teaching a regular flow class, your class should always be relatively balanced. You know, you're kind of touching all of the bases of nice things that are to do in a yoga practice. But if someone comes to you and specifically says, I want to work on chaturanga, or I want to learn how to do an inversion or an arm balance, you're not going to teach them warrior 2. You're not going to, you know, you're just going to specifically say, these are the things that you might need to work on to do this thing. And it's just a really effective way to get people working on the things that they need to work on. which I think is really nice. I think it's really good.
Have you thought about mentorship?
So I want to start one personally with. I'm going to start working with Justin Wolfer.
Oh yeah,
individually with a few things, which I'm looking forward to. Because again, specific things I would like to work on. And he's obviously an incredible teacher, so to get the chance to learn from him, and I feel if I felt through that experience, I was able to pass on some stuff in a useful way, it definitely would be something that I'd be interested in. I like to offer that to teacher trainees that have just qualified and stuff like that, not in a specific mentorship way, although I think that would be nice. But obviously the teacher training groups can also be quite big. But to offer people a bit of guidance if and when I can.
Yeah.
Because again, it's just something that's really been resonating with me over the last little while, just that personal relationship with people. I think it's important, and I think it's a really, really beneficial thing. So it's definitely something I'd love to explore a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah, because it's in my head, because someone asked me 2 days ago, sent me this big long message on Instagram about advice and mentorship, and I thought, and I had been asked advice before, but I never thought of it as mentorship, you know, and then I started thinking about it and doing research as to it, and I don't think I'm quite there yet to give people advice about their career, although I kind of do it indirectly through this podcast. But I don't know how valuable that is. You know, I don't know. So at the moment, I just advise people. You know, there's no charge, there's no program, but it is interesting to think that sometimes you don't realize what you know and what other people know. You know, I take my system, my kind of daily habits as like, this is what I do. I don't really think about it, but you don't think that some people struggle with projecting their voice or their body language or their morning routine or the confidence, and that whole area I think is really interesting. But I mean, because I know you said before that you never really struggled with confidence. That when you spoke, like what I mean, Bryce, remember you mentioned that
I don't really get nervous.
You don't get nervous,
no.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, I've never really gotten nervous.
The ice.
I don't know. But I probably said it in the last podcast as well. I sometimes wish I got a little bit more nervous, because I find myself being incredibly unprepared sometimes. Like, if I was like a little bit nervous here, I maybe would have done a bit more work. But confidence, I'm not so sure. Like, I wouldn't necessarily like describe myself as an overly confident person. But definitely like nerves is not something I've ever really. Yeah. I've ever had that much of a problem with. As I say, good and bad sides to that.
Would you say, like, from the trainings that, because you've done a fair few trainings now, you've been assisted on trainings as well, and you know you've led your own trainings. I'm interested, like, about when people do a teacher training, what is the one thing that really surprises them? Do you think that you've seen as a trend that people say, man, I wasn't expecting X, after they've done the training?
It's hard to say. Most of the trainings I've done, I've led, would have been kind of 10-month courses and stuff like that. So I find those are actually sort of a gentler, a slightly gentler way to kind of ease into the course. I think people are always overwhelmed by the amount of information, whether that's physically, philosophically, you know, there's so many subtle things that go into the practice. So I think that's something that's always like slightly overwhelms people. But compared to, say, an intensive course, I find the 10-month courses are a slightly more kind of gentler way to sort of ease their way into it. But what I would probably say is what surprises most people is the amount of people who, as the course goes on, find out that they do want to teach. That so many people started without that much of an expectation of teaching, and I find that so many people end up with that kind of desire to want to teach, which I always find a little bit surprising. Not that the people aren't capable or anything like that, but it's a lovely thing to see people kind of, maybe it's a confidence thing, or but see people sort of grow into that role of being comfortable with sharing in that way. I think is a lovely, lovely thing to see, and I think that is something which maybe takes people by surprise a little bit.
So do you think that's because it's quite a emotionally charged environment? Like if you did, for example, I've done this before, when I've worked in corporate jobs, they put you on public speaking courses, or they do this, and you do it because you feel like you should, the company are paying for it, but it doesn't make you want to do to lead the next board meeting. Yeah. That's what I found. I just thought, this is a bit of a DOS. I can kind of like, take a half day off work, go to these presentation things, and then but then when it came to maybe Kevin, you'll lead the next meeting, I'm like, oh God, because I think maybe because I wasn't interested in the topic, and also as well, it is a very like, the environment was, I was doing it for the wrong reasons. Yeah. And that's what I'm wondering, like, do you think it's because, why is it that people want to make, because that's a big jump to go from not wanting to teach to wanting to teach.
Yeah. And I definitely think this part of the challenge of teaching yoga, or teaching anything that you care about, I'm sure, is that there does feel like a level of exposure, I think, when you're kind of talking about something that you really, really care about. It can make you feel a little bit vulnerable, maybe. But I think maybe it's just people maybe find a little bit more confidence in being able to express what they really gain from the practice. And I think like anything, if when you really, really love something, and when you like get a lot of benefit from it, you're going to want to share that. You know what I mean? If you get a really good recipe, or like if you see a really good film, you want to share that with people. And I think that's something which kind of develops in people over the course, is that they maybe gain a little bit more ownership of what it is that they really love about the practice, and that maybe gives them a little bit more ownership in feeling like they want to share it a bit, which I think is a lovely thing. Like I think it's really, really nice. I always say to people at the start of every course, one of the first things that I say to people is that just because you love practicing yoga does not mean you're going to love teaching yoga. It's a different thing. You might love playing music. That doesn't mean you're going to want to sit down and teach someone how to play basic chords. You know what I mean? It's just it's not quite the same thing. But I'm always surprised is probably the wrong word, but I'm always happy would be a better word, by the amount of people by the end of the course feel that it's something that they want to do. It's nice. Yeah, it's really, really nice.
And I think as well, from my own personal experience, when I've been on courses, if I've liked the trainer, if there's something about them that I either identify with or I want to replicate, and I see a trainer, say for example when I was doing my 300 hour at DICE, I remember I was such a fanboy. I was sitting right at the front, like, there he is, and then he's
a pretty impressive man.
Yeah, and he's a sweetheart as well. He's such a lovely guy, but and then he'd say things or do things a certain way or handle a situation a certain way, and I think I'd like to be more like that. That's a part of my personality that I think I'm capable of doing, but I just haven't practiced it enough. For example, his patience, the way he delivers things, he's so sensitive in how he delivers things, and so seeing that made me want to become a better teacher. It sounds really cheesy, but
well, I think if anybody who's good at anything, whatever it is, has to be a really good magpie. You know what I mean? Like no one.
What's magpie? Is that
like borrow things?
Okay, all
like
right.
Like everyone, whether it's a high level sportsman, a high level musician, a high level teacher of anything, those high level people to me are the people who are really good at borrowing things. Yeah. And so I don't think there's any kind of. I think that's a really good quality to have, to look to replicate things that you find are really beneficial. I think it's a good thing.
But also as well, it's the personality themselves, the character of the person, but how they deliver the information as well. Because sometimes we were talking about this downstairs a little bit, but sometimes you can deliver content in a way that's very dry or very, you know, when you're in school and they have the slides up and the slides are, everything that's on the slides is in the manual or whatever you'll read, the handout, whatever you're given, and the teacher's going through bullet point after bullet point after bullet point, basically reading the manual to you but via slides. And what I'm really interested in is how content is delivered. So my missus, she's just done her massage course, well, she's doing really well actually. I won't go into that, but she was talking about, I don't know if I can say this, but two different presenters who had very different styles. That's all I'll say. And how one was way more engaged than the other. One, they were really interested in the topic, and two, there was no that system. It was very much. I don't even think they had slides or anything. They were just talking about it, and they were talking about their own personal experience with it as well. Which and that's made me interested for you to talk about, if you don't mind, how you deliver your teacher training, your system, because I think it sounds really good.
Yeah, kind of like we were talking about before. I sort of just kind of like fell into it. Wasn't like a plan of mine. It wasn't like I didn't go to the Yoga Hub and say, I've got these great ideas for the teacher training course, let me do it. It just sort of happened. So I had to like very much learn on the fly. But I definitely think a big part of it is sort of teaching from your own experience and not so much from manuals and slides are good. I like slides, but because I think if you don't teach from your experience, if you're like, Jason Crandall had a really nice post about this like a while ago when he said about teaching from what you've actually felt. You know what I mean? And that you can teach, you can sort of know the basis of things. You can sort of know the structure of something, and you could teach that structure probably quite effectively. But if you're not teaching it from personal experience, there's always going to be a little something missing. You know what I mean? And so I think that's what I try to do. Like I definitely would never ever claim to be someone who knows a huge amount, but I feel like the stuff that I do know, I know quite well, and I try to teach basically what I know. Which so far seems to be going okay. So far,
yeah, definitely. But
because I was really conscious. I don't know if you might have felt it a little bit with the last teacher training group that qualified, and I was just so conscious that they'd spent so much time with me, and that I'd really kind of like limited their experience by just but they all seem to do really well.
How would you limit their experience? Or what makes you think that?
Well, maybe that's not the right way to put it, but just that I think I have a relatively specific way of looking at things, or I just think there's very specific things I find really beneficial because it's kind of, as I say, the things that I've felt within my own practice. And so even if those things are maybe a little bit less traditional is maybe not the right word, but that's what I teach. You know what I mean? Like I won't teach something that I haven't felt within myself to be really beneficial. And because I'm only one person, I'm sure that means that there's lots of stuff that I don't experience as being beneficial, which other people would.
But I think it's really important to be subtle, and I'm sure you are very subtle, but with how that's communicated. But how that's communicated. Like for example, sometimes it's possible that people fall into the habit of saying, okay, this is the traditional thing, but I don't agree with it. This is what I think. And I think like it's important to say to people, this is one philosophy behind something, whether it's bending the knee, not bending, whatever it may be. And this is what I've experienced. Yeah. And to kind of, because you want to allow people to make up their own decision, I suppose. And speaking personally is great, definitely. But what I'm conscious of when I'm communicating is that I'm not saying that means it's right.
Yeah.
And I think that I've become way more conscious of this than when I'm just talking in general. That I'm not a fundamentalist about things. And sometimes when you're trying to get a point across, it's easy to slip into being a fundamentalist instead of being a bit more considerate about other schools of thought. But you said about you don't know everything, and that's kind of a comment that sometimes we all say sometimes, oh, we don't know everything. But ultimately, in my opinion, the yoga teacher training for me was not to learn necessarily about yoga, but to learn about how to teach yoga. It was to learn how to become, or how to move towards being a master in terms of teaching yoga for what it means to you. And I think that would be the main thing I would assume people that want to get out of a teacher training. Have you seen different?
Yeah. I actually find most people, the majority of people who would sign up for a course that I've taught on anyways, wouldn't necessarily have that much of an interest, or at least they wouldn't explicitly express that much of an interest in teaching. And
what's the main interest then? To learn more about yoga and deepen the practice?
Yeah, I think so. Like personally, when I did my teacher training course, after the first week, I kind of didn't want to do any of the teaching specific stuff. You know what I mean? I just wanted to do the practice, the philosophy, like that was. And then when it came to like, oh, this is how you cue, and I was like, oh, fuck's sake, I don't really care about this that much. Like I didn't actually have that interest in wanting to teach. And yeah, so I'd find a lot of people, I think over the duration of the course, that stuff, they definitely maybe grow into that a little bit more. But I think most people are just a little bit more interested in learning a bit more about their own practice, whether that's physically, learning a little bit more about the philosophy that's kind of like underpins everything. And obviously some interest in the teaching part as well. But it's very rare that you would get, like, say, in the first few weeks talking to people, that there will be a few people that say, yes, I want to teach. But most people are kind of like, see what happens. Which is interesting.
Yeah. Actually, speaking about that weekend...
When did you know that you wanted to teach? Before you did the course?
No, I did the course. I did the course because I wanted to learn more about yoga, but because I started practicing yoga. And
was it just an intensive, or?
No, it was over a year.
It was over a year.
Yeah, 1 weekend a month for a year. And then one day I had a conversation with my sister, and I remember I was teaching her plank, just plank, and I was like sweating teaching her. You know, I was so into it. I was like, and if you do this with your hand and that with your hand, and my sister kind of looked at me and goes, you could, because I was at the same time I was talking about how I felt lost in my job, and she said, you could do this for a living. And I kind of just laughed it off, but it's put a little seed in my head. And then when I went back to the teacher training, I started thinking about, oh shit, now is going to come the time where you got to stand up speak in front of people. And I was just like, I already felt awkward because I was not being sexist. I was the only guy in the course. I couldn't sit cross-legged. I was a bit awkward, not flexible. And then when they told us to get up and speak, although I was nervous and stuff, I had a moment where I was like, oh, this could be something I do for a living. And although I was nervous and I made a show of myself, I kind of didn't know what I was saying. I was trying to teach Trikonasana and I just got it all up. I got my left and right mixed up and stuff. But then I thought, it kind of went from there, really. Yeah. Yeah, what about you? When did you realise?
I never... it just sort of happened. Like, genuinely, it's not even... looking back now, I was working in the Yoga Hub for a little while on reception, and Katie Coldrick, who she was sort of head of the teaching side of things at the time. And to this day, I genuinely don't know why. Like, I think I'd been in her classes and stuff, but like, it wasn't like oh, whoa, this guy is amazing. We got to get this guy to teach. Like, she was always like, oh, when are you going to teach? When are you going to teach? And I was like, and it was eventually, I think sort of just so she would stop asking me. I was like, I'll do a demo class with her. I did a demo class with her and Casey. Two people, like, I don't know where I'd be if it wasn't for those two. And for whatever reason, they decided to, like, support me in these ways. I have absolutely no idea, but they did, and I couldn't be more grateful. But so I did and so this is one of the cases where my lack of nerves sort of like didn't pay off. So because I went in to do a demo class for them, And I was only literally walking into the studio, I realized I'd practiced my sequence. I'd basically stole a sequence off Patrick Beach, and I was like, this is gonna be good, like it flows nicely and all that sort of stuff. I was only walking into the Yoga Hub that I realized I hadn't practiced like speaking any of it. Like I just practiced doing it. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, fuck. And so when I went in, it was a disaster. Like it was just like, and afterwards they were like, oh yes, the sequence is really nice, but like the rest of it was terrible. Okay, but they were like, oh, we'll do it again in a few weeks, and did it again in a few weeks. That one went like a little bit better because I'd practiced. And at the start of the year, so that was kind of coming towards the end of that year, 2016, 15, I don't know, but and Art was leaving to go to Thailand, and so one of his classes was available, and for whatever reason Katie just said take that class, and it's just also like went from there. So it was never like I'd never, still to this day, there's sometimes I'll be in a class teaching and I'll just have this moment like, what the hell is going on here? Like how did this happen? Like so yeah, it wasn't planned, but it seems to be going okay so far.
Well, I mean, it's one of those situations where sometimes you don't need a plan. I mean, I remember when I was still working in the corporate world, I wanted to start my own business, and I met up with this business advisor, and he said, "Have you got a business plan?" And I said, no, because I don't know what's going to be happening in a year. How can I plan for something? And I think that's almost an old-fashioned way of thinking. In the software industry, they call it agile planning, where you have a general idea, a mission statement as to what aligns with what you want from your life. And then when opportunities don't come up, normally you have to go out and get them. Then you decide, okay, this aligns with my whole mission statement in my life, or it doesn't. And why am I talking about? I forgot why I'm talking about this. But that's why.
Sounds like a plan you'd need a lot of money for.
Just see what happens, basically.
Yeah.
No, but I do think, like, as you said, that with the teacher training, you saying that you didn't plan it, but you.
It's probably really bad advertisement for the trainings.
No, man. No.
Just come along, we'll see what happens. Yeah.
I mean, you do plan to teach, but you didn't plan to be a teacher trainer.
Yeah.
But often it's right place at the right time, and I'm sure you were doing a great job, and therefore when the opportunity came up, you were the first person they thought of. So. But what I realise is that everything I do now, every single thing I do with the podcast, the sponsors, like all the corporate classes, public classes, events and stuff, every single one I've started, as in I've sent the email, I've started it. I mean, maybe some people get people approaching them, but I realised that, and I say this to my missus as well, I says, like, I can say this now, but she's going to be a massage therapist, right? It's kind of a big deal. And I'm like, you made this happen. You know, sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit that we feel like life happens to us, but you'd be amazed when you realise how much influence you can have in your own life. I'll get off my Tony Robbins box now.
No, well, it's interesting because I was in India in January, and for the first time I read like the Bhagavad Gita, and I learned a lot about karma, which I never really understood before. And I always understood karma as like cosmic comeuppance. You know what I mean? That like if you do something bad, karma's gonna like come back and get you. But what I understand about it now is that karma basically means cause and effect. So every single action, so that's the word karma means action. Every single action you take is both a cause and an effect. So it's both something which is the result of a previous action and sets the stage for future actions. It basically encourages you towards moment by moment experience, to understand that each moment is unfolding into the next one, and that what you do in this moment will result in what happens in the next. And I think it's something which can give you a lot of ownership.
Yeah, definitely.
That I think it's something that we very sort of intuitively feel, but maybe don't always take ownership of it in the way that we possibly could. So yeah, it's something that I sort of like see in a lot of things now, this sort of unfolding of karma in this interesting way. Yeah, it's cool.
But it gives you, I think, a bit of a sense of empowerment as well, because I think that, say my missus again, I talk about it all the time, but...
It's very sweet.
So that...
You make me feel bad. My girlfriend's going to give out
yeah. Shout out to Lauren.
She's a lovely person.
She's great. She's great. Really great. So my missus would say like that she feels you feel a bit vulnerable when you've gone from everything is structured out for you in a 9 to 5, your whole day is structured, you don't have to think about strategy or anything like that, but now you have a sense of vulnerability because it's all on you and it could go away at any moment. But what I'm trying to get across is that when you work for someone else in a 9 to 5 job, you don't know where that is. It the sword of Damocles they call it. You don't know what's happening overhead. Yeah. You don't know if you're going to be gone the next week or if you could be there for 20 years. But at least when you take empowerment, stock and responsibility of what you're doing, you understand that there is a law of rule of cause and effect, and that you can make things happen, and everything affects everything. And I think that is something to be excited about.
Yeah.
I mean,
it can be scary as well. Like the idea of security is obviously something that's kind of like ingrained into us as human beings, and moving towards positions that feel less secure is obviously a little bit scary. But like I said, I think it's an opportunity for a lot of self-study, a lot of like growth. I'm always a little bit resistant to that word, or I have always been a bit resistant to that word, but I'm trying to like...
What, growth?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. It's so I've become very philosophical over the last few months, but I'm trying to pay more attention to my patterns, and I personally think a pattern that I had for a long time was this idea of I'm a very consistent person. I'm a very sort of like steady, consistent person, and this idea of like growth I always felt as sort of like reaching, maybe. I'm not too sure of the right way to put it. I'm still trying to kind of like contextualize it with my own head, but I actually think that it was just a pattern I had like a resistance towards ambition, maybe might be a word that I might use. And so the two words that I've always like really disliked is like growth and journey, unless it's about an actual physical journey. I always had this kind of like my handstand journey. Like I hate that, but I'm starting to realize now that that's like a pattern I have. For whatever reason, I've developed this pattern where I feel resistant to that sort of way, and I'm trying to move past that and become a little bit more open to the idea of like growth and journey. So journeys might take me a little bit more while to get used to, but yeah.
That's funny. I know what you mean about patterns, but I think maybe say don't need semantics, but if not growth, then maybe just awareness. Yeah. Awareness to, and it's definitely...
No, growth's a good word. I need to get over that. Yeah.
So, but we're talking about resistance, and it's so funny you say that, because this person asked about mentorship. They were saying how they're resistant, or they didn't say the word resistant, but they are reluctant to go out and try and get more classes for themselves, and because they're scared that it won't work, or they don't want to go into a role where they don't see themselves as that person. And I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking about this case as an example. And I referenced the book The War on Art. The thing about why we resist things, because we don't want to fail, essentially. And I feel this on a weekly basis, because every week I try to teach something that I'm practicing. Therefore I practice it, I understand it in my own body, how to regress it, progress it. Then I have to figure out how I'm going to teach that. And I've realized that sometimes I almost chicken out, and I almost think, no, I'll just stick with the fundamentals and do what, kind of a teacher class that's worth my grasp. But then I think, no, this is what I really like to do. I get excited about teaching new stuff. It works for me and feels good in my body. But I do experience that resistance that we all do. It's like with the teacher training, preparing for the teacher training. I had that resistance of, wow, this is a lot of work. And then you start procrastinating. And you do the things that are easier, like the Instagram post or the send that email or whatever, instead of what's that? Oh, it's a plane or something overhead. Or instead of addressing the most important task that at hand.
I think responsibility is a difficult thing. And I think maybe when you're teaching more so the stuff that you care about, like you're sort of saying, you feel more responsible for it. You know what I mean? It's less that, like, if people don't enjoy it, you can be like, oh, they just weren't interested in the fundamental stuff. You know what I mean? But if people aren't interested in stuff that you care about, it's like, they're not interested in me.
It's personal, yeah, it is. It's so true.
So I think that's like, it can be a scary thing.
Yeah.
But again, to constantly keep referring to these trainings, but again, it's one of the things that I always try to say to people at the start of the trainings as well, that if you are going to teach, it's better to teach 2 people something that you really feel is beneficial to share than 40 people something that you don't really give a shit about. Obviously that might not necessarily like pay the bills, but not everyone has to make their living being a yoga teacher. And I think I think it's an important thing to teach the things that you actually want to teach.
Because because then you might have a smaller like audience is not a great word, but like
student base.
Student base. You might have, but they'll be the ones that really like your style, and then they'll come. Because like I think like the amount of people that come to the workshops is not as important as I like it when it's the same people, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. That they actually, I'm doing something right. It's great when new people come as well. Don't get me wrong, but I think, oh, this is good. I'm seeing the same faces, and as well, it's quite satisfying when you've known someone for a year. And I mean, man, I have seen some people that come to my classes, and they're like, the progression they've made is unbelievable. It's just phenomenal. People that come in and I've had, I'm sure you get it as well, people that send you messages and stuff to say, I was on certain medication for years and now I can do X, Y, Z, and I'm completely healthy and I started eating differently and stuff like this. And that is really satisfying compared to just all about the numbers and doing big events. But although I wouldn't say no to that either.
Well, I personally feel that the role of a teacher is kind of relatively limited. I think unless the engagement of a student is there, then you could be the greatest teacher in the world. You're not going to get very far. And I find when you have teachers that are kind of passionate, they attract students that are passionate. And I think that's where really amazing progress can happen.
Speaking of passion, I'm gonna do a little segue here, but I got to talk about the legend that is Jenny Keane.
Oh yeah,
and that weekend, and I wanted to ask you about this because this is not in my comfort zone, and but I think it's a really important part of teacher training, is getting people out of their comfort zone and doing like so to paint a picture for people. The last weekend of yoga teacher training for YogaHub in Camden, the Camden branch, it was the graduation weekend.
Like a thunderstorm.
Yeah, there's a thunderstorm happening. Ooh, it's exciting.
It's Jenny Keane energy. She can hear you talking about it.
Forgive us, Jenny. Have mercy. But so that weekend, it was the graduation weekend assessments, that type of thing, and I was there as to help with the assessments. And so Jenny did this ceremony at the end where we did some dancing, interpretive dancing. I don't know what I was doing with dancing, but I was jumping around, and long eye contact holding, and kind of hugging, this type of thing, and talking about that kind. You get the idea, basically. Yeah. And this is something similar to what I did in the cacao ceremony when I went to Bali, and I found it with stuff like that. I start off, I'm like, oh no, I know what's going to happen here, and I have that resistance. Yeah. I'm like, well, I'm out of my comfort zone. I've got to be, but it is transformative, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
I nearly cried, man.
Yeah, I wasn't. I had to go to Spain. So
you weren't there?
I wasn't there. No.
Oh, man, sorry, Bri.
It's okay. But but I've done one of them with her before. The summer training last year, she did something similar. Yeah, it's, I think, a huge part of teaching, and one of the parts of teaching which I think is such a beneficial spill over into your general life is to get a little bit better at like sharing, and a huge part of sharing is obviously not just words. It's like your presence in that moment as well. With stuff like eye contact or this, it's yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing to go through. But there's a lot that can be kind of taken from it. On my teacher training, it was like the first time I got to kind of introduce to stuff like that in one of our second days we had to do eye contact and like hugging, and so like kind of stream of consciousness, like speaking and things like that.
To a partner.
And it's something that I struggle with a little bit sometimes. So it's something which I think is like a really good thing to work on.
Yeah.
And something that I'm trying to include a little bit more in trainings now as well. Because I think it can be a little bit easy if we're going to like talk about patterns and stuff like that to not necessarily be dishonest, but to share in sort of very structured ways. Like, you know, it's such a cliche, but you know, when people say, "Oh, how you doing?" You say, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine," regardless of what's going on. You can't really do that when you're making eye contact with someone for an extended period of time. Like, you can't pretend to be feeling a certain way, and even if the way you're feeling is really like awkward, you still can't pretend to not feel awkward. And I think that kind of exposes you to a level of vulnerability, which I think is really important. Something we could all do with it, with a little bit of, even though it's tough.
Yeah, but it does peel away layers as well, because, for example, in that cacao ceremony, I've talked about this in the episode I did about Bali, but I went in and, you know, people, and I'll say this as well, a good yogi or a yoga practitioner is someone who practices non-judgment, definitely, right? But I find myself judging people, and I think probably that's why it's a practice, because I'm trying not to, you know. And I remember going into the cacao ceremony, these two guys came in carrying like bongos, and they had their like man bun going on, and they were like talking. So sorry for that. You got a lovely mane, but like, and it was all like really intense eye contact, really looking at you for a really long time. And I thought to myself, because I was uncomfortable, I was reflecting that back on them. I was a bit like thinking, I just thought, oh, this is so cliche. That's I didn't think anything bad, but I just thought this is cliche. Instead of going, these seem like nice people, whatever. But then once we got into the chanting, the dancing, the intense, really intense vinyasa class, and Johan Guest was doing the he's Brian Guest's nephew. He was doing like these motivational quotes as we were practicing, going, "Beautiful people don't happen by accident. Beautiful people, we are all beautiful." And I was like, yeah, man. Yeah, I was real like, I'm feeling this. And sweat was pouring. I was looking at Rach, and you know, it was like, and then I was completely into it. I was like, I'm here now, because I think actual chanting together singing together, singing or chanting, I think that's really powerful. It's like when you go to a football game and you start singing with each other. Yeah. Something happens, man.
Vagus nerve, apparently.
Yes.
So
go on, Brian. Preach. No, I'm with you on this one.
But it's true. So your vagus nerve, your 10th cranial nerve, it's a really important nerve for parasympathetic nervous system stimulation, but it's also known as your nerve of compassion. So obviously we evolved as a species to be communal, and that there's built into our system things which encourage community, and one of these is like our vagus nerve. And apparently things that activate the vagus nerve is things like chanting, singing, bowing. Is one of the theories of why religion is so effective, because a lot of the religious practices, probably not consciously, but they stimulate vagus nerve activation. Community, cold water. I was surprised when I learned that one. Apparently cold water stimulates the vagus nerve. So I think there's a huge thing to be said for that kind of group practice in terms of things like chanting, or like you said, the kind of group energy that can build around a practice, because we are designed to be communal. It's part of what we are as a species.
And also, Brian, I think it's important to distinguish between singing and chanting, because often people think, I'm not singing, I can't sing. But with chanting, you're simply creating a vibration, and that is that to stimulate the vagus nerve, and that is the essence of it. You're vibrating together, but we're all vibrating on the same or similar vibration. And man, I think that for me now, so I like to do what me and my girlfriend do is we go back to back at end of a home practice, back to back, hands together, namaskar, and do 3 arms. And you know when you feel each other vibrating, it's like real. It's powerful, man. But that type of thing interests me, because.
Do you teach? Do you ever practice ohms when you teach in your classes?
95% of the time. Yeah. I like to do 3 in a row. But I do preface it by saying, look, it's not singing. Right? I can't sing. And you can hum instead for the vibration, or you don't have to make a noise, but I'd recommend it. And I do talk about the vagus nerve sometimes, but I try to keep it quite short, because your explanation there was brilliant, but in a class you kind of can't, especially at the end, people. Do you like doing the
No. No.
Okay.
No. So when I teach, I don't.
Okay.
But I don't know why though. Maybe I will. I think it was just a habit.
I would had you down as an ummer.
No.
That's a verb.
But maybe I'll begin. Maybe I'll start. I always like to finish classes by just letting people just have a moment to just reflect on their own kind of reasons for practicing. Yeah. But there's absolutely no reason why I couldn't include an Om in there as well. Because it's a really beautiful part of the practice. Like it really, really is.
I think it really is. It puts everyone on a similar level almost. Another thing I started doing a lot more recently, because I'm just more comfortable with it, is guided meditation. So I take people for a guided meditation, and I've been doing one lately, and it's not like I'm not trying to make people cry, but I do feel when people are crying.
Just a little bit. You're a little bit happy when people do cry.
I'm like looking around. No one's crying yet. Okay, I'll go over here. Imagine a sick puppy. But I kind of encourage people to feel something. It's like this is the thing that I like to get across, is that we don't always have to feel calm. And when I'm practicing yoga, I feel a spectrum of emotions, because I'm a pretty emotional person, and it's good to feel that, to see what you're feeling and just without reacting. And I feel that if you can end a class where, I mean, again, there doesn't have to be an actual physical expression of emotion, but for people to feel something, I think that can be. It's quite powerful, because I was, because I'm changing now, because I want to. I have been in the past guilty of being very anatomical. Okay, this is the benefits of this pose, very physical, not talking about the other stuff. So, and I find with yoga, I really like teachers that touch on that move outside the physical stuff. I really like that. So therefore, that's why what interests me about with the teacher training, being able to do group activities or tasks where people are interacting with each other in a way that involves imagination or creativity or something like that. And I'm go on, so Brady.
No, but it's one of my favorite things about the teacher training courses is that it is interactive. It's not so much you kind of standing at the top or middle of a room being do this. It's you get a feel for why people are there, and it's interesting. It's for me personally, at least, like it's such an amazing learning opportunity. Like I learn so much. Every course, not even the course, even in general classes and stuff like that. But like it's why I'm sometimes a little bit resistant to the idea of like classing myself as a teacher, because I feel like I'm kind of learning and developing as much as anybody else is. And so it's a really, really nice thing about the teacher training courses, or the retreat, for example, or anything where you get to kind of work with people in a slightly more. Not that the teacher trainings aren't formal, but it's not as. You're not just in a room with 60, or not 60, but you're not in a room with like, in a group of strangers for 60 minutes. That it is more kind of, well, at the same time, I know some teachers who are able to create that sort of interactive environment within a class, but it's a nice thing.
A class is a bit more like, in my opinion, a performance, slightly, because they're there to be delivered something in a certain flow, a certain pace. You're there to present an idea, essentially, constantly presenting ideas. Whereas, as you said, teacher training is interactive, and therefore you almost, how I felt in the past on the student side is you almost become like their peer. You feel like more like your peers, and you're sharing knowledge as opposed to that is the teacher, they know everything. In fact, actually, that's something that I'm mindful of as well, that I like to kind of let people know, look, I don't believe in having a guru. I think that I just really enjoy doing yoga, and this is how it's helped me, and hopefully it helps you the same way. I hope you like the class, that kind of thing. But there's a thin line between that and being self-deprecating, because I also, when I'm in a class, I want to know the teacher's in control, and but again, that comes down to communication skills. I'm actually, I'll give a shout out to not a shout out, but I sent an email to this guy who's a public speaking. He's like one of the major like public speaking coaches in Ireland. So hopefully you're going to get him on the podcast. But have you ever done anything like that, like public speaking course or anything like that?
No.
No.
No. No. I think that's probably quite obvious. You're
being self-deprecating there, Brian.
No, it's an interesting thing. Like, again, as I find myself getting a little bit more philosophical as I get older, actually just language itself is something which fascinates me. Just how language works. I just find it so interesting, and I think it's something. As a teacher, it's such an incredible tool, and that can be used so effectively, in subtle ways as well. So it's definitely something I would love to, not necessarily learn more about, but I think it's just something that's so interesting, the use of language and what language is. I've listened to a lot of like Michael Stone, and he always talks about how language is just a tool. It's not, you're never actually describing the actual thing when you use language, or you're never capturing the actual thing. You're only there's always a separation when language is used, and that can become a real barrier, that can become a real mask, or it can become a really playful way to get close to what we're actually feeling. And I just find that it's such an interesting thing. Yeah.
Have you thought about how you're going to explore that topic more or learn more about it?
No, not really.
Because I feel like there's only so many articles you can read or YouTube videos you can watch. Because I've done the same about learning about language and how to be a better communicator and how a better listener and stuff. And I'm interested in like maybe, I mean, this helps recording yourself, and I listen to this, hear myself speak, but it's very unpolished, these podcasts, you know, there's ums and ahs and bad words sometimes and stuff like this, but this is how I was speaking through downstairs having a cup of tea. But I do think that when you're communicating ideas that are more like technical ideas to people, that it's the most important thing is that that you're interested in language, I think, to be a really good communicator. Whether how you develop that is really, it's kind of subjective as to how good you are as a communicator. But I think as well, I completely agree, language is so interesting, and voice is so interesting as well, because that is such a good tool.
It's a really, I think when you sort of really start to break it down, when you start to think about communication and stuff like that, it does become a kind of a philosophical thing, and it does kind of open you up to a lot of sort of in-depth thinking about yourself, I think, when you start to kind of really analyze how you communicate, like why you communicate, why you kind of use these methods and stuff like that. I think it says a lot about you. And stuff like this, again, when we kind of come back to talking about like patterns and stuff like that, it can be, and I actually think it ties into the idea of like security as well, that it can be like kind of weird exploring these things, but it's a very enlightening process as well. It's interesting.
I think it's good to be introspective in that way, and because ultimately our words are powerful, man. Like we don't realize it sometimes, but you know, to some people in a class, you can really affect them, and I think you've got to be really mindful of how you use language, and that and the effect you can have on people. And the great thing is, you can have a really great effect, but it requires introspection and wanting to be more mindful of what you're doing and better at your craft. I think that's and I said this before, but that's the thing I really love about this as a craft, as an occupation, vocation, whatever you want to call it, is that you can, it never stops, as in it like yoga never ends, it's always developing, and so can your way of communicating that.
No, I think it's interesting. I think it's you're probably in a similar boat as well, that you know, we'll be relatively new as teachers, and I think it's I feel like traditionally, or maybe in the past, people would have been kind of experts when they started to teach. You know what I mean? Whereas I definitely don't feel like I was an expert when I started to teach, but I don't feel I would have been exposed to this kind of thinking if I hadn't have started teaching. But it's a funny thing to sort of like learn on the job. Like it's it's really, really interesting.
And I think that requires a little bit, it does require vulnerability, and to when you're feeling almost, it sounds like what's the word, like is it an oxymoron, but kind of being confident in your vulnerability, almost, you know, allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And because I wish I had that. That was what I found quite off-putting when I first about the thing about yoga, is I thought of someone who was like a guru who'd really be preachy, and a bit like, it reminded me of the church, and I didn't like that really. So that's what put me off. So hopefully maybe the newer way of teaching yoga, like almost sharing yoga, and you learning from us, learning from the students learning from us, it can encourage, it lowers the barrier of entry, so that you don't need to be able to put your leg behind your head or know the scriptures. You can.
It's funny, when I did my teacher training course in India, and I really, really disliked my lead teacher.
Really?
I just thought he was an awful man. Like, I just thought he was like not a nice person.
Why's that?
He was very, very, very egotistical, like extremely egotistical, and it was like a relatively big group during the course. It was a relatively big course, and he had like assistants and stuff like that, and he was just so rude. We were like, just give me my water, and like and like. He was a very arrogant man, and I remember the one that always sort of like sticks in my head is that one of the girls in the course, she did like wheel for the first time, and everyone was like, oh, whoa, like, hey, applause and stuff like that. And he's like, do you see how I got her to do wheel? Like, did you see how I did this? And I was like, what a dickhead. And I remember on that course, and again, I wasn't planning on teaching or anything like that, but I was like, I learned so much from him. In ways, I was like, I just don't want to be like that man. Like, I don't want to be like that. And I learned so much from that. And I think obviously you probably would be aware as well. I don't know how normal people who don't teach yoga, or who aren't like massively interested in yoga, I'm not sure how aware they would be of like wider trends and stuff like that. And obviously, I think yoga would be seen as going through a bit of a change at the moment, that there's kind of like a bit of a sort of like a disconnect between maybe slightly older methods of teaching, maybe slightly newer methods of teaching. But I find personally the teachers that I think are most, and the teachers that I would see that are making the most difference out there, are the ones who are sort of willing to empower people. The ones who don't hide their methods, or don't like, there's not this like, I am going to teach you how to do this. You know what I mean? It's more so, well, if you try these things, maybe this will help you do this. And I just think that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
To remove that like rigid structure of teacher-student. Because no matter what level you're at, I personally believe anyways, you're still figuring stuff out. And to be open about that, to be accepting of that, and I think to kind of use that as a way to meet students where they're at is just a huge thing. You know what I mean? And I think, whatever comes of yoga stuff in the future, wherever it goes, if that's one of the outcomes, things will change for the better, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Because that guy was a dickhead. And amazing. I learned a lot from him in a lot of ways, but yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It taught you how you don't want to be.
For sure. Yeah.
Because you could have thought, oh, that's what a yoga teacher is. I don't want to do this.
Yeah. Look how amazing that man is. Look how he got her to do wheel.
Yeah,
whoa.
So, yeah, mate, I'm conscious of your time. What's next for you then? I don't mean today. I mean in the foreseeable future. Even though planning is overrated.
I don't know. I've never really looked that far ahead. I would see myself. Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes play around with the idea of not teaching anymore, taking a little break from that. I think that's something somewhere down the line I'll probably step away from teaching for a little while. But I think for a more immediate future, I would like to sort of get more into that kind of more personal teaching, like one-on-one stuff or small groups, or for example, me and Paddy recently did like a handstand course and stuff like that. Stuff where you get to work with people individually, consistently. Just from doing stuff like that, I've actually seen really immediate benefits. And that's something I think I will be leaning more towards in the future. Yeah.
What about retreats then?
Retreats,
you still want to do
retreats
them?
are cool. Yeah. I'd like to do one in November in Ireland, which I'm kind of like thinking on at the moment. My girlfriend Lauren has a really good retreat coming up in September, in Kerry, 13th September, which I'm going on. I'm not like teaching or anything. I'm just going.
Oh, sweet.
Because like retreats are awesome. Like they're really good fun.
She's also a brilliant artist. I should say she's a great artist.
She's a good eye for like design.
Really has.
Yeah. So it's gonna be a nice retreat. If anyone is looking to go on a retreat, you should come. And you're doing one too. That's sold out, isn't it? That's kind of yeah. Are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, I am. I'm really. I know all the people going. So
what's the plan?
What's the plan? Oh, it's very planned. Well, the plan is go down Friday night, have dinner, do a practice. Well, I do a practice, have a dinner, and then Saturday we are going to do a hike, a guided hike with this guy who's supposed to be. He's going to talk. He talks about like the plants, the flowers, and where they're from originally, and what they can be used for medicine, all that kind of stuff. And then we have a hot tub as well. One of these big wooden hot tubs that they actually get from Electric Picnic. The same ones these Electric Picnic. They buy them from there. Yeah. And so I went to this retreat center myself. But I'm looking forward to it. It's my first retreat again, and
it's cool. It's a really nice experience.
I'm really excited. It's just again the organisation. When you do something for the first time, I've realised like how to next time make it a bit more refined, a bit more streamlined. That's the word. Yeah, mate. So that's retreat. Obviously, teacher training starting in September, workshop in August. Sorry, and then after this August 31st workshop, I'm just going to focus purely on teacher training. We're not going to do workshops for a while, and just do teacher training and give that 100%. Yeah, mate. That's pretty much. I mean, so far so good. I can't believe that things. We're very lucky to do what we do. I feel very lucky anyway.
Extremely,
man. And it's like I jump out of bed in the morning. I mean, I absolutely am just so happy to be able to have so much empowerment in my life, And
do you have days where it's a struggle, or is it always?
Mate, funny you say that. Very funny you say that, because what day is it today? Tuesday. Yeah. So on Friday, I couldn't get out of bed because it was so hot Thursday night. It was really hot, really, really hot. And I slept really badly. And then my girlfriend it was like, she couldn't believe I was... Normally I get up at like 5, honestly, mate. It's nuts. I get up really early. I jump up. Anyway, I couldn't get up. And I thought, right, there's one thing I'm going to do today. I'm going to do my yoga. I do yoga practice every morning anyway, but I didn't want to do it. For the first time in a long time I remember, I didn't want to do it. But I did it. And it just reminds you that, like, man, sometimes moving and breathing, paying attention to how you're feeling...
Yeah.
Like when you're doing it automatically, you don't really realize the benefits. But that morning, I was like, I feel like shit today, and I did it. My day was much better than if I didn't. But
Amy Apoliti talks about how every time you practice, you're adding to your spiritual savings account.
Nice.
And so some days, like, things are going good. You don't. Like, you've got loads of money, you don't really need to save, but you do it anyway. And then there will come that day when you'll just kind of need to draw on that savings account a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a cool thing that even the times that you're practicing, I don't like, it might not feel essential that you practice. You're still just topping up that savings account for the times that you need it.
Mate, that's such a brilliant way of explaining it, because I'm quite methodical. Like, I'll say, right, tomorrow morning, this is what I'm practicing, and this is what I do. And I take a moment to be grateful, do my chanting. But that morning, I didn't want to do anything. And sometimes, like, it's not a great slogan, but something is better than nothing. I thought I like to feel I'm progressing, and whether that be physically or emotionally or spiritually, but again, if you just get on your mat, I know it sounds very cliche, but like, if you just get on your mat sometimes and just don't even think about having an objective, just move, breathe, look after yourself, it adds to that bank account.
For sure. Yeah,
you gotta love yourself, man. Otherwise, you love yourself, then you can love everyone else.
Well, yeah, for you there is nothing else, only yourself.
Nice.
You got to look after number one.
Yeah.
But not in a selfish way.
Yeah. You can't pour from an empty cup.
exactly.
Have we got any more quotes?
I heard a really good quote recently, but I can't remember what it is now. I do like a good quote.
I do
I'm
too.
a fan of a good quote.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Brian, mate, that's been a pleasure. I'm sure. I think
too,
we've probably broken the time for the longest podcast ever.
Really?
I hope.
No.
Because this is great. Yeah,
There's
mate.
a lot of pondering. A lot of silences. I don't know if you'll edit them out.
I know, nah, man. I leave it all in. But yeah, cool, Brian.
Pleasure, mate.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed that. Before I let you go, 2 events that are coming up are Fueling Flow on August 3rd and Heels Overhead on August 31st. So all information can be found on my website, kevinboyleyoga.ie /events, was it a comma? Like a little dash, retreats. You can find all information there. If you would like to share the podcast on your IG stories, that would be fantastic. It always helps. And please leave a review if you have a chance. As always, this podcast was brought to you by Small Changes. Small Changes are a local, organic, eco-friendly, plant-based whole food store here in Dublin. They offer products, refills, a juice bar, and they believe in the zero waste ethos. I believe in them. I think it's really important to support the local community. So if you're in Dublin, then pop into them in Drumcondra and have a browse. Thanks as always for listening, and I'll catch up with you next week.